Hey guys, Chris Morrell, Revolutionary Canine. This is a video, an instructional video to talk about the e-collar technologies mini educator. Now, if you have done a board and train package with us, then you know that this is the collar that you get at the end of the board and train for your dog to go home with, and that you can utilize for corrections. Now, essentially when the dog is here, we use the house collars because we don't want to mess up your nice brand new collar. So before leaving the property, your dog is actually fitted for a brand new collar, and the collar is set up to the levels that your dog personally needs. What I wanted to do with this video is show you, whether you've done a board and train here or you just stumbled upon this video, and just kind of be an instructional video to talk about the mini educator, the functions that it has, and of course different ways that we can set this thing to the way that I do it here on the property for our board and trains. Now, get right into it. This is your box. Pretty nice and neat, to the point. See, it says mini educator. You have your remote on one side, you have your collar here in the middle. Now, when you open this box, you will find this setup. You'll have your charger, you'll have your receiver, which will be known as the collar. You'll have your remote or your transmitter. Here you will have a lanyard, just in case you want to hook the remote to the lanyard and wear it around your neck. I'm not a big fan of that, but I know some people are. You'll also find some extra contact pins and a couple little tools right there that you can use for the collar and the remote itself. So let's dive right in. All right, guys, upon looking at the remote, you'll notice a few things. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get the charging ports out of the way so we can move on to other things. You'll notice on the back of the remote, you will have a charging port right there, okay? On the back of the collar, you will also see a charging port. Now, e-collar Technologies has done a great thing. They got you a little 110 plug that goes right into your wall in your house, along with two pigtails. One goes into the back of the remote, one goes into the back of the collar. So essentially what you have is you plug this up and you can charge both the collar and the remote up simultaneously. And guys, just a little heads up, it takes 2 hours essentially to have a full charge of your e-collar Technologies e-collar system. So I'm going to go ahead and put that away. And just a side note, you can't overcharge the collar, so you can leave it on all night long. Now, essentially, just kind of a general rule of thumb before we get into this, you do not need to have this collar left on your dog for more than 8 hours. The box, actually, underneath the box, you'll find some information regarding your warranty information, and then of course your user's manual. Now, you can definitely read through that. I strongly urge you to read through the user's manual. It will say in there that the dog is not supposed to wear the collar for more than 12 hours. I tell people 8 just to make it safe. If you were to leave the collar on your dog for too long, these contact pins could rub abrasions. It's not that the collar is burning your dog, it's the fact that you have left this on too long and the contact points have actually made abrasions of the skin. It's kind of like bed sores if you lay in the bed too long. All right, moving right along. Again, underneath the tray, you will find your user's manual, which is super handy. It goes through everything that we're going to talk about here. Also, you'll find just a notice regarding possible metal allergy. e-collar Technologies does actually sell contact pins that are made out of different materials, so your dog can still utilize it even if your dog has a metal allergy. One thing that's cool about this is a waterproof unit, okay? The collar is waterproof, and along with the remote actually floats, but they do want to make you aware that if the dog is going to be exposed to water a lot, make sure that you continue to tighten these up, that there's no possibility for water to get in. So just periodically do a little check and make sure that all your screws there are tight. Of course, warranty and registration for your unit is right there as well. So we're going to put all that to the side. Now guys, digging into the other things that come, again, this is a lanyard. It simply hooks onto the remote and goes around your neck. So if you take the dog on a walk and you don't want to hold the remote in your hand, you can put it around your neck like so. In these little bags here, guys, you will find that there are extra contact pins and the tools in which to work with your system. So essentially, these are longer contact pins. If you have dogs like Huskies or German Shepherds, Malinois, Pyrenees, dogs that have a lot of fur, and essentially during the winter time, they actually develop that undercoat, you're gonna definitely wanna hang on to the longer contact points, because in the wintertime, you may wanna just change the short contact points that come standard in the collar with the longer contact points. Now, I'm gonna show you how to do that. In this other little plastic bag, and they do a good job of making it where fingers are hard to get these things open, but in this little bag, you will find your tools. Now, essentially, this is a light that when you hook it to the collar itself and you depress the buttons here to make sure the collar is working, there's a little light that will pop up. It's like a tester light, just so you can see that the collar is actually working. I personally don't use those. I just put the collar on my hand or my arm just to ensure that it's actually on and working properly. Now, as far as the tools, this little tool here is what takes off your contact pins, okay? So essentially you'd slide that on like so, and you'd pop it off, and you can remove the contact pins by screwing them off, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. If you were to change those out, make sure you put the tool back on there and crank it down to where it's nice and snug. So that's your tool for that. Lastly, you will see this little coin-looking thing. This is actually a tool that is used to take the skin off of your remote, okay? Now, there's little slots on either side. You will pop the cover off, and this is how you can access the inside of your remote if you ever have to change a battery or anything like that. And guys, on a side note, if you ever have any issues with your eCollar Technologies Mini Educator, there's a 95% chance that it's gonna be the battery, okay? The battery that's in the remote is the same as the battery that's in the collar. Call eCollar Technologies up and they'll get you hooked up with some batteries, okay? And if they charge you anything, I'd be surprised, but if they do charge you anything at all, it's going to be very, very minimal. You'll probably actually pay more for the shipping than you would the actual battery itself. Now, moving on. So we're left with our collar and we're left with our remote or transmitter. Transmitter, receiver, remote, or collar, okay? Ever how you wanna call it. Let's talk about the remote first. When you first turn your remote on, you'll look on the back. It says on, off, light. Now, in this situation, there's just a big button in the back, okay? You're gonna press and hold that down. When I press, I'm gonna hold this down. It's gonna flash on, and now the unit is on, okay? I say it's on, but it's just the remote that's on, guys. The collar has not been turned on yet. I can't stress this enough. Remote, collar, transmitter, receiver. They're two separate entities, guys. Turning on the remote does not turn on the collar, okay? We'll get to turning on the collar in just a second. But first, when you get this thing started, you will see a flashing 1D at the top. You will see a 0 in the middle, and you'll see an M on one side and a C on the other side. This is a 1-dog unit, okay? Although we can configure this to be a 2-dog unit, right now out of the box, it's just a 1-dog unit, so you'll see it's flashing 1D. Now, the M is for monostructural. I'll tell you what that means, and the C is for continuous. If it's set on monostructural, and you would do this by this little button on the back, the new remotes, you have to actually hold it down, it'll toggle over. Now, what that means is essentially the M is the only thing showing. If I press this button and hold it down, it's only gonna send one signal to the dog. It'll just be a nick, boop, just one. Boop. Mono means one, right? Now, if it is set to continuous, which I'm gonna hold that little button again to get it to toggle over to the continuous setting, now it's on continuous. Now when I hold the button down, it's gonna essentially continue to send that signal for up to 10 seconds. It does have a safety feature on it to where after 10 seconds, it will shut off. Not the collar shut off, but the signal, the stimulation will shut off to the dog. So heaven forbid, this thing gets lodged in the console of a car, ladies in your purse, guys in your pocket. and you're sending a signal to your dog just doesn't sit there and get a signal the entire ride to the store. It will stop after 10 seconds. So it is a safety feature there. Now, I'm going to take this and put it back over on monostructural. Now I'm going to let that toggle all the way over until it says M again. This is how I set up the collar, guys. Again, this collar is fresh out of the box, brand new, so I'm going to set it up. This button here, whatever the display number is, okay, is this black button. So you're taught when you bring the dog here that if you say the word no, 1.3 seconds later, you press that button down, okay? Now, this red button is going to be what we are calling the boost button. I do want to make note of this. From the factory, it's got 5 clicks higher for the red button. Now, what that means is, and I don't know if you can see it, but this is registering a 5 right here. Okay, you see that 5? If I press the black button, it's going to be a 5. Okay. However, if I press the red button, it's going to be a 10. Okay, you see that? That comes standard from the factory. Now, the difference between 5 clicks is really not a whole lot. It's not necessarily going to constitute a boost, so to speak. So what I do is I like to set this for a little higher stimulation. Okay, actually a much higher stimulation. For bigger dogs, I usually go 40 clicks. For medium-sized dogs, somewhere around 30 clicks, and of course for small dogs, somewhere around 20 clicks or so. And how I do that is I will set this on 0, set it on monostructural. I will then hold down the black button. Now watch how I'm going to do this, guys. I'm going to hold down the black button. We're going to hold this button down until this flashes for a 1, okay? So I'm going to hold this button down. I'm going to wait until that number flashes to a 1. Then I'm going to turn this, and let's say hypothetically speaking, I was going to turn this to 40 clicks higher. I will then press the black button one more time, all right? Now, at that point, the red button is going to be set to 40 clicks higher than whatever the black button is set to, okay? Now, because I do things a certain way, I want my remote to be set on continuous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this little button. I'm going to hold it down. I'm going to wait till it goes to continuous. Now, check this out. So let's say I've got my dog running on a 10. What I'm going to do is the black button is set to a 10, but the red button now is set to a 50. Okay, that's because the red button is 40 clicks higher. All right, so now for the rest of this, I am going to refer to the collar. I'm going to go ahead and turn the collar on so you can see how we do that, and then we're going to start seeing how the remote and the collar link up. You'll see a red tab right here, guys. The red tab on the collar and the red tab on the remote is how essentially you're going to turn the collar on. Notice that there's no blinking light on the remote, or I'm sorry, on the collar. I'm going to take my red tab and my red tab, and I'm going to touch them together, and now the collar is on. You will have a periodic green light flash to kind of let you know that, hey, the collar is fully charged, right? Now, if that green light turns into an amber light, you know that the battery is dying. Okay, we need to get this thing on charge at some point. If you see that this is flashing a red light, then that's saying you don't have long at all. Get this thing on charge. I strongly recommend you charge this thing every single night. Just get in the habit of it. That way it doesn't stay on your dog. This collar does not need to stay on your dog more than 8 to 12 hours at a time. Essentially how we're going to set this up to where you put it on your dog is it's going to be at the 4 or the 8 o'clock position. 8 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Do not put this thing on the dog's trachea, okay? Do not put it in the middle of the neck. Put it on the muscle on the side, okay? Now, just like any other buckle collar, you would essentially loop this thing through the clasp like so. Let's see if I can't put it on my own arm real quick. Like so. And how I do this, guys, I want to make sure that I can get 2 fingers underneath this collar and that the contact points are making contact with the dog's skin. Right. So now moving forward, we have our collar turned on, now we have our remote turned on. You will notice that when I press a button, that there is a corresponding light between the remote and the collar. If you do not see this corresponding light, that means that the collar is not turned on, okay? If the light is lighting up on the remote, but the light is not lighting up on the collar, that simply means that the collar is either not on, not charged, or you have a malfunction somewhere. So there is that corresponding light no matter what you press. Remember, this is the working level on the black button, which is also going to be whatever is on the display, okay? Red button is going to be the boost button, whatever you set that boost to, higher than what is on the black button, okay? There is a button on this other side that has a T. The T stands for tone, but from the factory, this comes into a vibrate. And you can see how this works. I'm going to put it on the table. I'm going to press the vibrate button. And you can see that it actually lights up and it vibrates. Okay, I'm not a huge fan of using the vibrate function unless I'm working on recall and the dog can't see me. I do not use the vibrate as a correction because chances are the dog is going to leave the property somewhere between a 10 and a 15 on the working level, which is actually less stimulating than the vibration itself. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you not to utilize the vibration as a correction. Now, moving on. Our level right now is set to a 10, okay? If we wanted to change that level, now this level on this display means nothing to me. What I want to see from this display is a level that the dog is able to receive the correction without twitching, okay? We certainly don't want the dog twitching in public. We definitely don't want the dog vocalizing in public off of the working level. Now, the dog will twitch, may even vocalize off of the boost button, but you do not use the boost button on a regular basis for corrections. Boost is only going to be for grossly unwanted behaviors, jumping up on people, counter surfing, things of that nature that you have to stop immediately. So the black button is what we want to have our level set correctly for. Now, again, I made note of this before. The level is going to be dictated solely by the environment, okay? So let's say I'm at home, it's just my dog and I might run on a 4, okay? Because there's nothing going on, no excitement, we're in a quiet house. A 4 may be plenty of correction for my dog. Now, with that being said, I get some friends call me up, they want to go down to a street festival where they're going to have bands, carnival rides, and all kind of different stuff like that. Obviously, it's going to be more stimulating. Or I take my dog out to eat with me and there's a whole bunch of stimulation going on. I might have to raise that up, okay? That 4 may be a 14 or a 13 or a 20. It really doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that the dog is receiving the correction, understands it's a correction, but not twitching to where someone from the outside can see that I'm actually correcting my dog, okay? And this is going to take time for you to learn your dog, the corrections, what it looks like when your dog gets a correction versus what it looks like when your dog gets too much of a correction. So the display number is going to be the black button, but it's going to be dependent solely on the environment and how stimulated your dog is. So essentially we use this top dial to turn that. It goes all the way from 0 up to high, which is essentially a 100. So just think to whatever you set this thing to, look at it in a form of percentages. If my dog is running on a 9, then it's at 9% of what the collar can actually do. Now, there's a really cool safety feature with this because this is a very, very sensitive dial. You can actually take this, once you have the number set that you want, you take this top button here, which is actually the dial, and you'll press it down. Once that number flashes, now the remote is locked. The knob still turns, but the dial does not turn, okay? The display number doesn't turn, therefore this is actually locked in. It's kind of a really neat safety feature. That way if you put it in your pocket, put it in your purse, put it in your console, this thing doesn't just, turn to where it's lighting the dog up, giving it too much of a correction, or sometimes even worse, giving it no correction at all when you press the button. You want your corrections to be true and you want your corrections to be just. So once you have your level set for the stimulation and the environment that you're in, you can leave it there, but always know that there's gonna have to be times where you're gonna have to turn this on the fly because there may be situations arise where a dog is coming to you, so you need to turn this up because you know it's going to be stimulating for your dog when somebody new comes into the picture. So therefore, just understand that this is going to be ever changing. There is going to be no, my dog only runs on a 9, whatever. And guys, understand too that this is not, it's not a game to see how low. This isn't golf we don't necessarily care to see how low our dogs are, so there's really no bragging rights when it comes to, well, my dog only runs on a 3, your dog runs on a 9, man, he must be hard-headed. That's not it at all. Essentially what we want to do is we want to find a correction level that works for our dog in that particular situation. Okay, outside of that, that's pretty much it, guys. So you just have your antenna, which is screwed in. Again, it's a pretty simple, very user-friendly remote system setup. There is one more cool feature that I'd like to show you guys. If you'll notice where the light is flashing that lets you know the collar is charging, or the collar is charged, it's going dead or it is dead essentially, there's an LED light right there, okay? On the back of your remote, you'll remember the on-off switch. Well, underneath the on-off, it also says light. Remember, when you hold this button down, you wait till it flashes off, okay? You're gonna hold this button to turn it on and off. However, if you just press it one time, it turns that into a flashing LED light, okay? Guys, this light is super bright. If your dog is outside at nighttime, essentially you're gonna be able to see this thing from a ways away. If you press that button one more time, it actually toggles to where it's a solid light, okay? Which is a really, really nice feature to have if you live out in the country, kind of like me, and you have your dog outside at night and there's really not a whole lot of light out there. You can see that sucker zooming around. It looks like a UFO is out there in your front yard. You press it one more time and the light goes off, okay? So just remember, guys, that everything with this particular unit goes up to a half a mile, right? So 800 yards or so is how far this thing will reach. So no matter if you're trying to send a correction, whether it be a regular black button, a red button, or you're trying to turn the light on, it will reach up to a half a mile. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. But guys, as always, I do want you to refer back to your user's manual, because there could be some things in here that we didn't cover that may be something more specifically for you. But I feel like it's at least enough to get you in trouble. All right, so if you have any further questions, do not hesitate to reach out, and we will see you next